Clive the Geek here, and this has got spoilers for Power of the Doctor, in case you haven't seen it. So as I'm recording this, the Power of the Doctor aired yesterday, and, that means it's the end of the Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall era of Doctor Who, and we've had another regeneration story and another regeneration. The Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, has regenerated into David Tennant. We'll have to wait until the 60th to see what that's all about, but yeah, we've had another regeneration, and I got a comment a while back. It was sort of asking, could you do a video on ranking the regeneration stories and whatnot in preparation for the centenary special, and I said, look, it is going to be after if I will do that, because there's no point in doing a video about the regeneration stories if you've got one coming soon. So I thought I'd wait till the centenary happens and then I'd do a video on it. And that's now, the centenary has happened. So let's talk about every regeneration story in Doctor Who. So these will be the stories where the Doctor regenerates. So the stories I'll be talking about are the 10th Planet, the War Games, Planet of the Spiders, Legopolis, Caves of Andrazani, Time of the Rani, the TV movie, those two quite briefly though, because they're more post-generation stuff. Part of the Ways, The End of Time, Time of the Doctor, Twice Upon a Time, and The Power of the Doctor. The Power of the Doctor will also be quite brief as well, because I've already done a video on it if you want to know my full thoughts on that. But yeah, it'll be quite brief, that one will. But I thought just do a discussion video, like the Chibnall era review thing, talk about them more, and maybe I'll put a ranking at the end once I've decided on a ranking. But yeah, let's get into it. So kicking this off with the original regeneration story, the 10th Planet, way back in 1966, the first time that this ever happened in the show. William Hartnell to Patrick Troughton, and the story also introduced the Cybermen as well. And aside from that, the story's alright, it's fine, but if it wasn't for those two elements, the first regeneration and the introduction to the Cybermen, I can guarantee this story would not be nearly as talked about, because the rest of the story, it's fine, but it's fairly bog standard Doctor Who. I mean, I do have to cut it some slack. It was the first time that they ever did it, and it was purely here out of necessity. Hartnell was getting ill. He couldn't carry on the part. I mean, in part 3 of the story, he's not even in it, is he? Is it? I think it's part 3. It's part 2 or 3, he's not in it. And, he couldn't do it. He couldn't carry on. But they couldn't cancel Doctor Who, because it was still popular. So they came with this idea of regeneration, which is a genius idea. And obviously it's not going to be, obviously it's going to still have the nooks and crannies. It's not going to be perfect. So, massive respect for, it being the first one to do it. I do have massive respect for the story for being the first to do it. Yeah, it doesn't feel like much effort went into signalling this as Hartnell's last hurrah. I suppose maybe you could make the link with the Cybermen, it's their introduction, and, Cybermen are people who live on, but mechanically, they add mechanical parts until they become, Cybermen. They live on through that, whereas the way that the Doctor lives on through regeneration is much more natural, and I guess you can make that thematic link there, but at the end of the day, it does just come across like Hartnell's contract ran out here, so that's when he left, and it's like the second story of season 4, so it doesn't really feel like much effort went into making this as a big last hurrah for him. And the story is fairly standard with the really annoying general character, but it's decent, it's fine. 7 out of 10 I'd give it, and respect for it, to start off this tradition in Doctor Who, but they've done it better since. Next up, we've got the 10-part epic that ended the Patrick Troughton era of Doctor Who and the 60s era of Doctor Who and the black and white era of Doctor Who, The War Games. Not confusing it with the Matthew Broderick film. Anyway, The War Games is one of not just my favourite regen stories, but one of my favourite Doctor Who stories ever. Top 10 easily. I think it's the best of the 60s era of Doctor Who, and I just absolutely adore it. I mean, you have to talk about the length to start with. It's 10 episodes, one of the longest Doctor Who stories ever, and I am not bored. I remember watching this, it would have been about 2 years ago around this time, actually, and I was about part 4 or 5, and then I had to go out, so I couldn't watch it all in one go. But honestly, I was that invested. I was like, thank God I can give it a break. And no, I was like, I've got to wait out later. So I watched it all in the same day. That shows how invested I am. That shows how great the story is. And it kind of proves the point that long-form storytelling can be good, long stories. Because you can flesh out these great ideas, this whole idea of the different war zones, from human history, like the Romans and the World War One, and it just put all together to create absolute chaos and destruction, and by the war chief, who's another Time Lord, and he's a really great villain. Like, he's such a creepy, sinister, memorable villain. And you've got the Warlord as well, and it's all great, and it's such a chaotic situation that the Doctor has to call on the help of the Time Lords, which is like, oh man, it feels epic. It feels big in scope, not just with the length, but also the fact that the Doctor has to get to the Time Lords to help out and intervene. It's just like, craps it in the fan. I need us to be careful with my wording then. It's a phenomenally directed episode. The part 1 cliffhanger where the Doctor gets executed, like, great. The war zones, the way that they depict them, it's so good. I mean, the cliffhangers. The one, episode 9, when the Time Lords are there, and it's all in slow motion with the Doctor running to the TARDIS, and they're like, just about make it. It's phenomenal stuff. It's so gripping. Jamie and Zoe's exit, at the hands of the Time Lords, just being ripped away from the Doctor. It's really heartbreaking. Troughton gives a powerhouse performance in this. The regeneration is genuinely horrifying. It's so mysterious and just creepy and unnerving, in my opinion. It is just such a special Doctor Who story, and that's why it works as a regen story, because it just feels so much more important and so much more care went into it. I'm giving it a 10. It's just phenomenal. John Pertwee now with Planet of the Spiders in what's got to be one of the weirdest Doctor Who stories I've ever watched. And that's not a compliment. It's just weird in the sense of, wait, what? What am I watching? Examples. Why is the Doctor in this? Why is his first scene in his final story? Why is it him watching some D-grade comedy show with a Brigadier? Why is episode 2 just basically a 25-minute Bond film with car, boat, hovercraft and helicopter chases? Why is the Humobile flying? Why are there stupid spiders that is basically just trying to copy what the Green Death did, but not nearly as effective? Why does it not feel like a Pertwee story at all? Why does it not feel like the end of an era? I should say that this was the last, except for Power of the Doctor, this is the last regen story that I needed to watch, because I've only watched it for the first time a few weeks ago, and it was just a baffling story to me. It was just really weird. The spiders are really crap monsters. Like, I can understand them being scary in the 70s, but nowadays they're not, like, with their weird high-pitched voices, and it just, this society that the spiders have built, like, what? It just doesn't, I cannot get into it at all. These civilization that's on the planet, again, it just feels like a generic, there's a civilization on this planet that needs saving. It's just kind of really generic stuff. The weird monk people on Earth, I don't get that either. I was just completely baffled by this story. Another problem, the length. I like 6-parters, I like long stories, but this one, the runtime is just padded out with endless filler. It just doesn't feel like a Pertwee story. It's just the distillation of, like, the campy 70s Doctor Who, and it just doesn't, I don't really like it. It's just, it doesn't feel like an appropriate end to his era. And I know the original plan was to get Roger Delgado's master. Unfortunately, he passed away. But I respect that. But do something Earthbound, one last time. I don't know. It just does not feel like a proper end to his era. It rings incredibly hollow. That's my main takeaway from it, and it doesn't really feel like a regeneration story. The themes of kind of moving on and changing aren't really there, except for maybe in the final part a little bit, but I just do not enjoy this story. 4 out of 10. Honestly, my least favourite regeneration story. Then we have Legopolis, the ending to the 4th Doctor's era in season 18, and this is one of the regeneration stories that I watched very early on in my Doctor Who fandom, one of the early classic stories I remember watching, because it came in a box set with Keeper of Traken and Castrovalva, and I remember this one very vividly, and it's always been one that I really like. This is really the first time in Doctor Who where the regeneration is really leaned into the kind of build-up to it, and the fact that, the Doctor knows that he's going to die, and, the character of the Watcher is great, and the ideas that have been running throughout season 18 of, like, entropy and decay and the heat death of the universe, these kind of things really do come ahead in Legopolis, and I like it. And another thing I like about it is that you've got these high concept sci-fi ideas in Tom Baker's final season, after 7 years in the role, and it kind of feels like, bringing these ideas up now, it's kind of the audience that would have started with Tom Baker when they were kids will have grown up, and it's kind of maturing with them. It's a very mature story and a mature season 18 in my opinion, so I really like that angle. I really love Tom's performance in this. I know a lot of people criticise his season 18 performance, but I really like it. It's quite moody, and it's very knowing and a lot wiser. At least to me, I think it's just really great, and it adds to the idea of the regeneration, the impending doom of it. The stakes, I think, are well executed, even though obviously they've not got the biggest budget to work with. I think it's very good. The Legopolis stuff is pretty cool. Ainley's master makes a great first impression, like a proper, first story. The companions, the companions are a bit odd. Like the Fifth Doctor TARDIS team are introduced here. It's a bit odd, but yeah, the music is incredible, and the regeneration is just, I think it's amazing. I've always loved this story, and I love how ethereal it feels. It feels very kind of the atmosphere and the tone. It's just so pitch perfect. So I'll give this one an 8 out of 10. I really ought to rewatch it though, because I haven't watched it in quite a while. Now we have the Fifth Doctor swan song, The Caves of Andrazani, which is a classic. It is lauded by fans, and whilst it wouldn't say make my top 10, it's still phenomenal. And it's kind of what I was on with Planet of the Spiders, of how you do kind of a lower key regeneration story. It's the concept and the framework is fairly traditional. The Doctor and Peri land on a planet, and there's like two opposing factions and whatnot. And obviously, you can have kind of scary dark Doctor Who stories with scary monsters or lots of deaths. Resurrection of the Daleks is an example, but the extent to which it's kind of like, obviously it's like Daleks killing people. That's very much fantasy, like, space Nazis basically. But with the Caves of Andrazani, it's grim. Like, there's drug runners, there's like mining disputes, the Doctor and Peri get poisoned, and it's like a really drawn out death, and it's just it makes the universe to be very horrible and nasty. Our main villain, Sharaz Jek, is just so creepy and weird, and just, he's really horrible, but kind of, there is an air of sympathy. I don't know. He feels like a very genuine character, but really horrible. Same for Morgus. He's such a selfish, slimy character. And, the two opposing factions, and you've got the gun runners who are just out for to kill people. And, like, there's no nice character in this other than the Doctor and Peri. It's such a grim situation, which makes it all the better that the Doctor is sacrificing himself for Peri, in this such a grim situation, and the direction, the scripts, Graham Harper, Robert Holmes do phenomenal stuff. The fact that it's accentuated of how grim Andrazani Major is it Major or Minor? And the planet, it's such a grim society. So the Doctor being this selfless and getting through it, it's such an inspiring story, I think, in that regard. And the fact that he's only just met Peri in the TV show, not counting Big Finish, the fact he's only just met Peri and he's sacrificing himself for the woman he's just met, it makes it even more impactful. Harper's direction is just some of the best in the show. I mean, the part 3 cliffhanger is fantastic, and the regeneration, it's so weird and kind of disturbing and just trippy, amazing stuff. And I really like how kind of disconnected it is from the rest of the Fifth Doctor era. Maybe it's because it's Peri there and only her, and obviously she was introduced in only the previous story. So it feels like there's not really any strong link back to the rest of the Davison era. And also Bob Holmes returns back from, like, the last story he wrote was like in the late 70s, so the Tom Baker era. And it just does not feel at all like a Fifth Doctor story. And I know I criticised Planet of the Spiders for that, but maybe it's because I'm not a massive fan of the Davison era overall, but I just think it works it's so much more impactful here, so it's getting a 10 out of 10 from me. Okay, now we're getting to a bit of kind of difficult territory, because for the next few stories, obviously we have the wilderness years and the kind of rocky period of Doctor Who from the Colony era all the way to its revival in 2005. So the regenerations are a bit odd. So Time on the Rani, at the very beginning, like the pre-credit scene of part 1, is the TARDIS getting shot down and the 6th Doctor, which is really just Sylvester McCoy in a bad wig because Colin Baker got sacked, regenerating into the 7th Doctor. And then the rest of that story is just introducing the 7th Doctor, not really ending the 6th. So I thought I'd give it a mention, but only briefly, because it's not really a post-regen story, and the regen is just a low point of Doctor Who. It's disrespectful that Colin just got sacked, and it's the worst regeneration. Like, just objectively it is. I don't think there's any arguing around it. It's just, yeah. But I mean, as a story, I enjoy it. It's a guilty pleasure. It's a bit daft, cheesy, bit very alien. I do enjoy it. But if we're going to talk about post-regen stories, this is the video for another time. But yeah, 6 out of 10. The TV movie is a similar case because the Seventh Doctor, this time played by Sylvester McCoy, at least he came back and, kind of filmed this. He was in the film for about 25 minutes and then obviously regenerates after getting shot, which is a really crap regen. Like these two, like where the Doctors are at the start regenerating, it's purely there just to fill in the continuity gaps, and little effort is given in these stories as a reason like why they die. It's just like the Doctor gets shot down in the TARDIS and he bangs it on the console, or he gets shot in New York or wherever the film's set. But TV movie, I did a review of it if you want to check out full thoughts, but overall not really a fan, to be honest. 5 out of 10. Okay, now getting on to my favourite of all these stories, Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways, which killed off the Ninth Doctor. This is one of my all-time favourite Doctor Who stories. Top 5 easily. It is. I think it's perfect. Genuinely, I adore it. And again, I did do a review of this. I did a podcast a while ago. If you want some full 25-minute ramblings with Ronnie, but in short, Eccleston having one series I think was kind of a blessing in disguise, because it meant that his character arc very much had a clear beginning, middle and an end, and that this ending, this culmination of everything in Series 1, every episode in this season mattered, and it culminates here in glorious style and fashion. It just is so astronomically rewarding, and this is also one of the first Doctor stories I ever watched. I just remembered Alex poses such a great threat. The setting of Satellite 5 returning from the long game, but the Doctor's actions there impacted this negatively. It's great, great character development. The stuff with Rose is just phenomenal. Like the chip shop scene was just incredible. It just sums up what the whole point of this series. This Doctor, this broken Doctor at the start of Series 1, healing and becoming a better man because the people he's met, like Rose, like Captain Jack, and like all the other characters you see in this story, so many memorable characters here, and it just gets, all of them just die, and it's really heartbreaking, and just as they get to the Doctor, it just builds and builds and builds so well. And, he doesn't end up killing the Daleks like he did in the Time War. He doesn't make the same mistake. That line, coward, any day. Just, Eccleston's performance is probably his best in the whole series, I think. It's just utterly magnificent. And the cause of his regeneration, sacrificing himself for Rose, even though, the whole TARDIS vortex energy, just erasing the Daleks. A lot of people say that's a cop-out. For me, because it had consequences on the Doctor, caused a regeneration, it's okay in my book. Man, I love this story. 10 out of 10. It's just, go see my podcast if you want full thoughts on it. Okay, let's talk about The End of Time, David Tennant's swan song. I don't like it. I find it massively overrated. And, I just don't like this one. Okay, I'll go things I like, right. Timothy Dalton's Rassilon, having Bond in Doctor Who is awesome. And Dalton gives a fantastic performance as Rassilon. He's so menacing. The music, Murraygold's music, it particularly stands out in this one, and almost makes me think positively on the story. Like, it's that manipulative in the way, it really does play on the emotions that well. And then Wilf, because Bernard Cribbins is just perfect. Okay, the things I don't like, how much time have you got? I think it's way too long. It's like 2 hours, 10 minutes. It's really overly long and over-bloated. It's overly indulgent, like with the whole farewell tour. Like, I know if you're fans of the era, fair enough. And I know, I know why it was done, but I'm not the mega super fan of the era. I think it's really great, but I don't know, it's just this self-indulgence that does rub me the wrong way, and it's just like, it takes forever. It takes forever. I think the Master is really bad here. No, not John Sims' fault. Like, he's a great actor, and his other 2 appearances as the Master are great. But here, his plan is daft, like putting his face on everyone. It doesn't make any sense, and he's now got lightning hands, and he's a skeleton dude. Like, it's just rubbish. It's not threatening. It's just stupid, and not in a fun way. It's just cringeworthy, I find. And the Doctor in this one, I don't like him. Not Tennant's fault. As I say, Tennant gives a great performance. It's just what he's given I don't like. I get that Tennant, his Doctor anyway, is meant to be a flawed character. He's meant to be arrogant. That's the point. I get that. But I just don't like it here, because it feels like he's still arrogant up until his death. Like, this should be the thing that he's overcoming. At this point in his era, he should have overcome this now. Like, when he saves Wolf, like, at the end, and he has that big hissy fit, and then seconds later he's like, it would be my honour. Whoa. You don't just go from a hissy fit to that in less than a minute. How does that happen? And the whole I don't want to go thing, it's like, this is something to me, a character flaw that he should have gotten over. But no. And the bit at the beginning as well, when he's just having a joke around and like, oh, I lock the tires like a car. For me, that just cuts the tension from Wars of Mars. Like, I don't remotely feel like he's the Time Lord victorious. Like, it doesn't feel like that. It just feels like an arsehole, quite frankly. And that's not the best lasting impression to leave. And the regeneration, I don't like that. I don't want to go. I have never liked that. Sorry, I got onto a really big rant here, I just realised there. 4 out of 10, I'm going to end this segment, but yeah, 4 out of 10. Do not like it, but it's better than Planet of the Spiders. Next, we have the departure of my favourite Doctor in The Time of the Doctor, Matt Smith's swan song, and this is such a... In terms of my opinion on it, it's very disjointed. It's very much split into 3 acts. The first act, I find really bad. I say really bad, it's not very good. It's very clunky in trying to wrap up a lot of things, like the silent stuff, really poorly done. I think the humour is not remotely funny, I don't find at all. It's just a really clunky start, I think. Then the middle, with when you get all the monsters and whatnot, you know, the Doctor defending the town called Christmas, I think it's a bit fan-servicey and a bit messy, but I do have a lot of fun with that section. And, you know, the stuff with handles, like when he, passes, like, great emotional moments, like the scene where he passes, yeah, that's a really great moment. And then the final act, the last, 20 minutes, is just, I think, top-tier Doctor Who. Seeing the Doctor old genuinely does bring a tear to my eye, because I don't know, I find people ageing sad. And, you know, the big regeneration speech and the destroying the Daleks, it's a bit silly and a bit cheesy, but I think it's perfect. I just adore it. It's the music as well. The music is so good. Oh man, I love it. And, you know, the cracking time, I think the resolution to that being the Time Lords, you know what? I'm cool with that, to be honest. And the regeneration scene, it's genuine. It's the only one in the show's history that has brought me to tears, genuinely. I think it's such a beautiful, touching way of looking at regeneration, and it just, that whole thing of, you know, don't forget the people you used to be. It's applying something that you can apply to the real world, you know, how people change throughout their lives. It's just such a beautiful story. And so it's quite messy, in my opinions on it, quite messy, but 7 out of 10, I think, overall I'll give it. It's fun, I'll give it that. Now we have Twice Upon a Time, which I watched on broadcast. It's weird that I've got 2 regeneration stories that I watched on broadcast. Jesus Christ. Anyway, Twice Upon a Time, it's a very odd story, but you know what? I don't mind it, okay? And I'm willing to admit that nostalgia can play a part in this. I mean, it was my first Doctor Capaldi going, so yeah. But I mean, I remember at the time, I was kind of lukewarm to it. I wasn't really fussed on it, and then as time has gone on, I've come to appreciate what it tries to do. As the episode is very much an epilogue to the era. You know, we had the big action spectacle at the end of the Doctor Falls and one in the Series 10 finale, so this didn't need to do that. I don't mind that, and I quite like the calmer nature, and it doesn't really have a plot, which I think structurally it's not the best. There's a bit of meandering, especially in the middle, with like Rusty the Dalek appearing and that kind of stuff, and the whole red herring of it wasn't an evil plan with the glass people. Yeah, but overall, I think some interesting ideas, and Moffat's final chance to make his mark on Doctor Who and show to the viewers what he thinks Doctor Who is. You know, the fairy tale. You know, it's brilliant, I think. Elephant in the room here, though. Sexist first Doctor, David Bradley's great performance, and the moments where, you know, like the why he left Gallifrey speech and the stuff near the end with Capaldi on the battlefield, beautiful. But the sexist stuff, no, that knocks the episode down a good few points for me. It's just abhorrent. Yeah, it's just awful. But I do like it. I like the idea of the glass people, how like memories can be like stored and like. If it was just your memories put in glass, is that you? That is interesting to me. I don't know, it's quite an odd idea, but I like it. Capaldi gives a powerhouse performance, I think. It's just excellent. Mark Gatiss' captain character, I think, is great. And the final 15 minutes, from the Christmas armistice scene to the regeneration, I think it's beautiful. The whole Christmas armistice thing is just it's just a beautiful scene. The stuff with the Doctors finally accepting their regeneration, it's great. And I like how it's not done in a kind of whiny 10th Doctor way. It's the idea that the Doctor is just so tired. He's lived so long that, is it worth it? And then he realises, yeah, it is, And I think it suits the 12th Doctor's character well. Like, there's a harsh edge to it, but a real, optimism underneath. I really like that. And I like the regeneration. I like the speech. It looks gorgeous. In fact, the episode looks gorgeous. The music, the music was a bit kind of rehashy. But, I mean, great tracks reuse. So I'll give this one a 7 out of 10. I do really like it. And that brings us to Jodys Regeneration right now, Power of the Doctor. Now, we'll keep this brief because I've just done a video on it a few days ago. But honestly, after a few days, the really good energy that it gave, like, it just gave really positive energy, and it really made me feel good, and it's lasted these past couple of days. Like, the Rasputin dance scene is living rent-free in my head, and just the discourse around it has been a lot more positive, and it's even like wider audiences. Like, my grandparents said that they watched the whole thing, and they were like, "Oh, David Tennant's back, I can't believe it, I thought it was really good." And I don't know, it just seemed to be, this episode seemed to have more of a presence than a lot of the recent Chibnall stuff, but still, I really enjoyed it. It's a very messy story, but the fan service works well, the Master is awesome, and just the celebratory, obviously it's the centenary special of the BBC, so all the classic Doctors and Companions coming back. This celebratory atmosphere, it's very positive, it's very optimistic, and I think that's required for a regeneration to ease viewers who love the Doctor, who's going, it's kind of that optimistic outlook on it. But especially for Jodie's Doctor, because she was so optimistic, I think it works ideally. So, yeah, it still gets an 8 out of 10 from me, this story. I really enjoyed it. But bear in mind, it could go down in the future, or it could go up. I don't know, but I really enjoyed this one. So that's the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Here's a little ranking of all the stories that I've put together now. I'm really surprised that Power of the Doctor is in the top 5. Like, I would have expected, like, kind of around where Twice Upon a Time, Time of the Doctor, 10th Planet are, like around there, maybe even lower. I did not expect it to be as high as it was, but hey, the universe will surprise you constantly. But yeah, leave your thoughts on all these stories in the comments below. Thanks to the guy who requested this video be done. Your wishes come true. And, like, subscribe, comment, click the bell, you don't miss a thing, all that good stuff. And this Clack of the Geek, signing out. Goodbye, everyone.